Hello everyone, welcome back to Marking Ariana Free. It's Sunday, which means a new video, and today we're adding to the What If playlist by doing another What If, and this time it is one that focuses around a pretty major plot point of season 4, and in some people's opinion, the only plot point of season 4. What if Riley chose Alfie instead of James? Now obviously Riley did choose Alfie at one point instead of James, but ultimately she went back to James by the end of season 4 and ditched Alfie and left him to go back to Switzerland and be the prince and, you know, all that cool stuff. But my plot starts from the episode Bold as Love, which is episode 33. Season 4 has so many episodes. So Riley would agree to go on Alfie's little trip away, just like she does in the episode, and she would leave Amanda and Michelle in charge. Even though I feel like this is a completely irresponsible thing to do, she'd still do it because ultimately who else is there, really? We'd see both Alfie waiting at the airport and James obviously struggling at Bangers and Mashups exactly the same, but it would be more of a point of which one is she going to choose. Like, we'd probably have more hints that there is a possibility of Riley going to see James. Maybe he says something in his talking heads like, oh, if Riley was here I'd feel a lot more motivated, and people can keep maybe checking the doors and stuff. I don't know, just something that kind of hinted that it could either go this way or this way. Ultimately though, Riley would then turn up at the airport, and it would probably be one of them things where you'd see just Alfie and he'd say, oh, what took you so long? And then it would cut to Riley walking through the door and everyone would be like, whoa, she's chosen Alfie, crazy. And then we'd then see James really struggling at Bangers and Mashups because obviously Riley hasn't come to support him and give him that little boost of energy he needs, just like in a fairy tale.
I'm trying to keep it together, but I have nothing left. I have nothing left to fight for.
But because Riley doesn't come, it means that James would lose his round of Bangers and Mashups at the final stages, and the boys would lose the whole competition because they'd be kicked out. So the boys lose Bangers and Mashups. Back at the studio, Amanda and Michelle would still be in charge because Riley hasn't returned yet. She's gone away with Alfie on a little trip.
Michelle and I have kind of been in charge since Riley went on her trip.
Michelle would be trying her hardest to really be a good studio head. The boys wouldn't come back to the next step to help the small group with their hip-hop routine because obviously they haven't won, so they're not going to have the same kind of energy and mindset to go, oh, we'll go and help some more teenagers with their hip-hop. They'd just be sad and they'd probably end up going home. So Michelle, as an acting studio head, would try and help the small group instead. She wouldn't be the best at it though, because obviously hip-hop isn't Michelle's main style. We've seen her do it a few times, but she wouldn't be as good as if the boys did come in and do it. Amanda would attempt to clean up Rochelle and Noah's duet while Michelle's doing that, because obviously James and Riley haven't come back, so we can't have any of those scenes. I know Noah is in both dances, but I figured that if he wasn't in the hip-hop rehearsal because he feels more confident with that routine, he could instead be rehearsing with Rochelle. His duet rehearsal also wouldn't take too long, so he'd be able to go down to the small group once he had finished. So Amanda would be cleaning up Rochelle and Noah's duet, and Michelle would be cleaning up the small group hip-hop. But Amanda would be wishing that she was in Rochelle's place because obviously she is with Noah at that point, and she'd probably give Rochelle some like corrections that weren't really needed to be made because she just wants to find something wrong with the routine. She'd be blinded by her love for Noah the same way that she was when she did his peer review in the peer review episode, which I found very cringy, but she'd do that the same. And then to give Noah a reason to leave the duet rehearsal, he'd probably call out Amanda and say that Rochelle was perfect or something. So they say that they'll call it a day and Noah goes to join the hip-hop group. Amanda and Rochelle could then maybe have a scene like they did at a hospital, and Rochelle could assure Amanda that Noah does love her. Just to add to the stress on Amanda and Michelle's shoulders, I figured that Amy would then ask Michelle if there's anything they need to go over in their trio, ready for regionals, and Michelle would have literally so much to think about. She'd probably assure Amy that it's fine and they'll just wait till Riley returns so that they can get an objective view, because obviously Michelle and Amanda are both in that trio and they're acting studio heads, so they can't really give an objective criticism. Towards the end of the episode, Michelle would call Riley and just say like, hey, when you come back, can you look over the trio? I've already looked at the small group and I've done the best I can. Amanda's working on the duet, and Riley would say that she's not coming back for another week because she's stuck in Switzerland with Alfie, and Michelle would probably be like, oh, okay, that's fine, even though it's completely not fine. And Riley would say that they need to make the decision about the alternate by the time she gets back, and she was thinking of either Cassie, LaTroy, and also Noah, depending on how good his back is. But because Noah's in the duet, it would probably just be between Cassie and LaTroy. And because Michelle had worked with LaTroy in that episode in the small group routine, I figured that she would be the one to decide upon Cassie.
I feel terrible. All I wanted to do was help the team win at regionals. Now I'm just stuck sitting on the sidelines.
So regionals would literally be in a week's time. Riley is still away, and Michelle and Amanda would both have to question what they need to do in the run up to it. They debate whether calling Miss Kate would be an option, but she's in England and they know that she can't really just drop everything and come and help them, so they decide against it and they just try and do what's best for them. And Skylar would say that if Alfie is willing to miss this much rehearsal just to go off with his girlfriend back to his home country, that he is obviously willing to be let go from the dance. So she would kick him off the small group and would then say, Piper, you can come in his place. And Piper, I feel like instead of being quite anxious about this, she'd be quite willing, because obviously she doesn't like Alfie at this point because Riley's chosen to be with him instead of her brother. So she'd be like, yes, I'm going to take Alfie's place in this dance, it's what he deserves. But then the same thing would apply where she still struggles to fill Alfie's shoes. But she'd have a small inkling of hope that he is going to return at some point, so it doesn't get her down too much that she's not picking up the choreography as fast. Cassie would overhear Skylar saying that Alfie doesn't deserve to be in the dance, and she'd really try and prove herself because she's just been made the alternate and she wants to kind of prove that she's not just a background dancer just willing to step in. If she can fill this position, she wouldn't have to be the alternate anymore. So she would work on her hip hop skills, but Skylar would make the decision that Piper would be a good fit for it because she's already proved that she can do hip hop in some aspects. Michelle would come in to watch the small group rehearsal with Piper now in it, and her phone would ring. It would be Riley, and she'd say that Alfie has a few more Prince duties he needs to attend to. Michelle would tell the team and they'd be irritated.
Alfie, are you serious? A-Trip is desperate for you. When are you gonna get over yourself and get back here?
Cassie.
Riley said Alfie had to go do Prince things. Are you kidding me?
Because Riley is obviously coming back alone and Alfie is staying out in Switzerland, Michelle would then tell Piper, yeah, there's no more playing games, you need to learn this role because Alfie's not coming back, which would stress Piper out, but it can all happen exactly the same, how she eventually learns the choreo and everything. Amanda would then be in Java Junction and Giselle would tell her all about the tour, and after all that she'd go up to Studio A, where Michelle would then present that the band is here to kind of give them some good luck and inject some good vibes because they've all been super stressed while Riley's been away and neglecting her job. James would also be there as part of the band, and he's fine because neither Alfie or Riley are there. I figured that he'd probably have a little interaction with Piper and also Noah the same way that he does. I thought it would also be nice if James wished him good luck or something, or commented on how much he'd matured. And Michelle would probably say in their talking heads that if Riley can forget all about her job, they are more than entitled to just have fun for 10 minutes and forget about regionals. Which would be very true. I don't think any fans would knock them for that because they'd literally be stressed to the limit. In the next episode, TNS would arrive at regionals with Riley. She'd be there, but obviously she'd be a bit in the dark about what's happening because Michelle and Amanda have sorted everything out. Michelle would be very annoyed with her as she thinks that she was out of order, and Piper would still be mad at Riley as well over the whole Alfie and James thing. Because this is like the first time they've properly seen Riley, Cassie would then advocate herself to Riley and say, hey look, is there any chance I don't have to be an alternate? Can I just be in the finals routine or something? And Riley would be like, hey, you're not important to A-Trip, you're not an important member. She wouldn't say it like nastily, it would just be very frivolous because obviously Cassie isn't a major essential part of the team. She's not in a featured routine, but she just wouldn't want to think about it, and she's already stressed because she's left all the responsibilities to the last minute. So she'd basically tell Cassie she's not necessary to the team, which would hurt Cassie, and it would kind of just make Cassie dislike Riley as studio head. Basically, my aim for this whole finale of season 4 is that Riley wrongs everyone in some way and eventually just makes it known that she is not a good studio head. Also, if Cassie doesn't get to dance at all and Riley tells her she's not important, it would make sense why she doesn't return in season 5. When they learn that the solo round is picked randomly and it's not a set choreographed routine like Michelle thought, Michelle would be even more annoyed with Riley for not doing her job properly.
This isn't fair.
Everything from them would happen the same, so Sloane would do choreographed material in her solo, Amy would confess to loving LaTroy and he doesn't love her back, Sloane would be outed and Riley yells at her, but this time Sloane would yell back at Riley and say, hey, if you did your job and read the guidelines, then it wouldn't be all on me. I wouldn't be put under this pressure, and this wouldn't have even happened because everyone would be at least a little bit informed that it could be them doing the solo. It was just because I felt like that was a bit weird that everyone just kind of overlooked the fact that Riley probably should have done that and done her job and already known what would happen for the solo round. So when Riley says that they're obviously going to have to do the trio now because they lost the solo round, Amanda would be really stressed, Michelle would be really stressed, and Amy would be really stressed.
I would feel much better if we ran through the routine a couple more times.
Because Riley didn't actually check the trio before she left for Switzerland, and she hasn't checked it since she returned, so they're just going to be doing a trio that they think is okay, but it hasn't been approved by their studio head. So in episode 37, Michelle, Amy and Amanda would ask to do their trio for Riley so she could check it over, give any last minute corrections or advice, but she really wants to watch the competition and just see what they're up against, which is completely stupid. Like, I didn't really understand why they were in the curtains the whole time, pretty much. Like, Riley rarely left the side of the stage. They'd also ask if they can double check all their details for the round, and Riley just wouldn't know where the paperwork is, like, at all. But Skylar would have it, which would make her a really good dance captain, and she'd say that she's going to go check everything out on Riley's behalf because she feels like she's more organised, which then means that she can have all the scenes with the security and all of the details. Because of the stress of the trio not being properly like approved of, Amanda would be really stressed and she'd debate going on the tour because it would just seem like, what's the point in staying at the next step if Riley's running it and she doesn't really care, she's stressed, and she could be on this really good worldwide tour. And Michelle would still be overworking herself, but it would be a lot more, like, it wouldn't be as out of the blue as it was because she'd be doing Riley's job as studio head. This trio hasn't been approved of. She didn't get to do her solo. She has to work extra hard because she feels like Riley isn't working hard. It would just be a lot less out of the blue, really. And when she's taken away by the medics after fainting on stage, Michelle and Riley's interaction would be a lot angrier, and Michelle would probably shout at Riley and be like, this is literally your fault. I can't dance now because you didn't check the trio and you didn't do your work and know that the solo was a random choice. And if you had done all those things, I wouldn't be as stressed as I was. I wouldn't have overworked myself. Things like that. Like, I just would have liked Michelle to make Riley feel a bit more accountable for everything. Why has the lighting just changed? The sun has just gone behind a cloud. So obviously, James wouldn't go to Switzerland to go and get Alfie in time to do the regionals routine because Riley's chosen to be with Alfie. James doesn't really want to go and see him. So Noah and Michelle would be dancing with a lot of doubt, knowing that it might not even be worth dancing, because if they won, they'd then have to do the 10-person routine, and they haven't got 10 people. But Michelle's just been taken away, and they haven't got Alfie. In that scene where Riley's on her phone in the wings of the stage, I thought that was really unprofessional, because obviously when you're in the wings backstage, you're meant to be really quiet. So Amanda would go up to Riley and be like, why are you on the phone? And she'd be like, oh, it's Alfie, he's just calling me to say sorry, he can't make it. And Amanda would be really annoyed with her because she just wanted to do her job and stop thinking about Alfie for once. Everything would be the same from them, but the pep talk at the end of episode 38, where Alfie walks in with James and everything, obviously they wouldn't have an option but to not dance because they didn't have 10 people, and Amanda would know that choosing the tour is the right option for her. She'd also probably announce it to the team then. It wouldn't be as out of the blue as it was. She'd be like, well guys, if we're not dancing, then this is the right time to tell you that I have been approached to dance on Giselle's tour, and that is what I am going to choose to do. So episode 39 would start with a Noah and Amanda scene, and he'd be basically assuring Amanda that it is the right choice. They don't really have any other option but to forfeit, and that they are going to get disqualified. They're not going to be able to win anyway. So Noah would be motivating her and telling her to go on the tour. Giselle would then arrive to take Amanda with her, and Amanda would go, but then Michelle would walk in from the hospital, and they'd have a discussion between the three of them, and it would give Amanda a really difficult decision because she knows that if Michelle is now there, they could dance if Amanda stayed because they'd have 10 people, but Michelle would be like, that would kind of be letting Riley win and think that her job had all been fine if they end up winning regionals. No thanks to her. So she tells Amanda, go on the tour, this would be the better opportunity for you. I'll just like hide out here, I won't tell Riley I'm back, and the team will lose. It would be a really difficult decision for them to make because obviously the next step could win at regionals, with Amanda and Michelle, but winning would make Riley think that her actions have been like worthwhile and everything, and they've worked out in the end. And also it would mean that Amanda wouldn't be able to go on the tour with Giselle. Riley would try and talk to Piper and get her on her side and just fix things, but Piper doesn't really want to know Riley anymore. Like, her brother's not going out of her. She's not gonna be her sister-in-law, so Piper just doesn't care. Like, she wouldn't be holding a grudge anymore. She just wouldn't care, literally, for Riley. She doesn't want to be friends with her. She's just an authoritative figure now. She's just her studio head. They'd probably get into an argument because Riley would insist on talking, but Piper really wants to stay focused. Like, we know from later seasons that Piper is a very anxious person. She likes to stay in her own mindset before she goes on stage and stuff. So Piper wouldn't like it that Riley is getting her all worked up and trying to talk to her about issues that she knows will get her upset and anxious. So they'd have an argument backstage. After her argument with Piper, Riley would then call Alfie, but she looks a lot more concerned this time with what he's saying on the phone. And basically, Alfie would tell her that he's not going to be able to come back because he has to stay in Switzerland as he's a prince, you know? So he'd say, it's better if we don't be a couple. You be you, I'll be me, and we can still be friends, but we can't be as a couple. And this would drive Riley mad because obviously she's chosen Alfie over James. She can't just go back to James now. She's literally been committed to Alfie. So now she's single. Alfie's in Switzerland. Piper doesn't want to know her. She's got her best friend in the hospital because she didn't check over her health and organise things. She doesn't know where Amanda and Noah are. Yeah, things are just going very wrong for Riley. Everyone would start packing their things away, knowing that there's no chance of them competing now. And Michelle would be hiding out in the atrium away from everyone because she doesn't want to present herself. And then everyone would be like, oh, well, if Amanda was here, we would be able to dance. And then start blaming Amanda because Michelle and Noah would know that the right thing for Amanda is to go on the tour. Yeah, Michelle doesn't want to be seen until it's absolutely too late for the next step to compete. So then Adrian would all go to the side of the stage while Gemini's performing, and they'd watch their final routine, and then they'd have to hear their name being called 3 times by the announcer, and they'd probably get a last warning like, if you don't come out now, you'll be disqualified, and they'd just be standing there, and everyone can see them. Like, the announcer can see them standing there, but they just don't go out. It would be a really sad moment to watch. We'd literally see their chances of winning regionals be taken away from them. So they'd then be called out as disqualified, and it would be too much for Riley. That would be like her breaking point. She's lost her boyfriend, she's lost her ex-boyfriend, she's lost her ex-boyfriend's sister as her sister. Michelle's gone, Amanda's gone. What else has happened? She's failed at her job basically, so she'd just break down crying. It would literally tip her over the edge. And she'd know that everything is her fault. She'd say in her talking heads that she doesn't feel like she's got anything left anymore. And it would just be a really emotional ending, because I feel like season 4's ending, we kind of knew they'd lose because of the build-up. It was still a shock, but it just wasn't kind of emotional enough for me. It was kind of overruled by the whole Jiley and Alfie thing. In the atrium, Michelle would see on screen that the next step have been disqualified. There'd probably be a camera cut to Riley breaking down backstage, crying, and Michelle would go run up to her, and she'd know that despite her obviously being there, meaning that they could have competed with Amanda, she knows the team wouldn't be thinking about that right now. So she runs up to Riley, she probably hugs her and says, look, it's okay. And even though Michelle obviously has this grudge against Riley for what she's done, she is still her best friend, and she knows that she needs somebody right now. So they'd hug, and she'd console her and everything. And we'd see Gemini getting their regionals trophy, and the curtains would close. It would be very emotional. So the end scene on stage, where everyone's kind of walking away and packing up their stuff, Michelle and Riley would walk out with each other and basically just put everything behind them and vow to have each other's back. Riley would also say that she's going to step down as studio head because she doesn't want this job. She knows it's not for her, which would show maturity, because I feel like Riley was kind of just forced out of the job, and it wasn't even really concluded that she would go to business school. It just seemed a bit out of nowhere in the off season that she didn't return to the job, and she didn't at least want to do it again to redeem herself. Piper would then go sit with Amy on the side of the stage, because obviously Alfie isn't here, so he can't do that, and they'd agreed to stick together for next season, which would tie into season 5 because they have a really strong friendship and rivalry at some point. LaTroy and Sloane would also be together, and Noah would still call Amanda, but she'd answer this time, because I thought it was a bit odd that she didn't even answer her calls. It had literally been an episode for them to break up. So Amanda would answer and probably just say, I'm really sorry I left, and Noah would say, it's fine, you do what's best for you, you're gonna have a really strong future, I wish you the best with the tour and everything. and then he'd walk off with Henry. He'd probably say a few lines about something. Riley would then do a final talking heads, obviously by herself, because James isn't going to come in with a promise ring and break the fourth wall. She'd say she misses James. She'd say she misses all her friends. She'd say she misses her old self more than anything, and she'd just say that she needs to do something for her, and she needs to leave Studio Head, and she needs to go re-find herself. I figured that'd be a really nice, wholesome ending as well, because you've seen Riley since season 1 very much just as a sister and as someone's girlfriend, whereas season 4 we get to see her more in her own light, and she'd end season 4 by saying that she wants to go and find out who she is without a boy. So really, she wouldn't get back with James at all for me. It would just be Riley as a sole single woman, independent woman, embracing herself and finding herself. Yeah, maybe they get together like in a few years or something, but it wouldn't be in the next step plot for me. So for season 5, because Riley says she wants to find herself, and Riley is obviously first and foremost a dancer, she would audition for A Troop in season 5 with Michelle, and obviously when Emily announces that she's studio head, it would be a shock to Riley too. She would have kept that from her. But Riley would make A Troop instead of one of the background characters that doesn't really speak. And when Michelle creates TNS West, because of the fact that hip-hop dancers were cut and everything, Riley would be asked by Michelle if she wants to be the choreographer instead of West. It would be able to give her a redemption of being studio head last season and give her an authoritative role that isn't as big as studio head, but it's not as little as just being a dancer. So Riley would take it because she obviously just want to find herself and better herself, but she doesn't want the whole stress of just going back into being studio head again. So she'd take the role, and Kingston would then come in and he would say that he saw TNS fail at regionals, and he'd probably laugh about it, and it would really hurt Riley, but she'd brush it off. He'd also probably laugh at Michelle if he'd watched regionals and be like, oh, you were the one that fainted on stage, weren't you? Because I feel like Kingston was very carefree back then, and he didn't really have the dancer respect for things like that he's slowly developed. You know the way that the dancers all danced with Kingston also after he shows his tricks and everything? Riley and Michelle would join in with that, but then Riley would realise that that is what she wants to do. She doesn't want to be a dancer. She doesn't want this authoritative role once again. So instead of Amy teaching the group all these different moves and choreo in episode 3, it would be Riley, and Michelle would see that her passion for dance is returning more when she does the moves than when she's just explaining them. Kingston would really still be struggling with everything, and he'd explain to Riley that he's a self-taught dancer and he learns from watching things, which would remind her of West, because obviously Riley's been on A Troop with West since season 1. So she'd be like, hey, I want to be a dancer, I don't really want to be a choreographer or studio head, but West does. I don't know, maybe she'd say in her talking heads that she's seen online that West has been looking for jobs and stuff, especially since he didn't get anything from the Bangs and Mashups thing. So she'd pull Michelle aside and be like, hey, I don't want this job, but I know someone who does, and she'd say about West and stuff. So West would be brought in, and Riley could really see that Kingston is a lot better at being taught by West because West understands him. And Michelle and Riley would have a big heart-to-heart about how dance is her passion. She needs to go find herself. She doesn't want to just be keep pulled back into the next step with different roles and everything. She wants to leave studio head behind. She wants to move on from that. She doesn't want to always have to redeem herself. So Michelle would let her go, and then she'd ask West, would you like to be my choreographer on TNS West? And he'd say, yes, of course, that'd be great. And everything would have a happy ending, you know? Riley would then say that she's going to go tell Emily. She'd go downstairs and tell her and stuff, and Emily would be happy for her. And that would be all we see of Riley. That would be her exit. It would be really, really nice and wholesome, and we'd see her redeem herself for season 5. And we'd get to see her decide what she wants to do with her future. Obviously though, later in season 5, in the actual plot, Kate brings in Riley and James as a couple to judge the dance battle between TNS East and TNS West. Instead of that, I figured she'd bring in Amanda and James, because Amanda's been on his worldwide dance tour, and also she has a soft spot for James. When Amanda walks in, Noah would probably look at the floor because he has this thing for Jackie now, and they haven't really spoken since they broke up. But Amanda would give a polite wave and be like, hey, how are you doing, everything, which would loosen up Noah, and he'd be like, yeah, me and Amanda were friends at one point. There's no reason why we can't be friends now. Kingston would probably ask if Amanda and James are a couple as well, because he doesn't know the history of the next step. And James would say something like, that's old news because they used to date before season 1 happened. And Noah would probably frown at that, and he would be confused because he didn't know that Amanda and James used to date, but that was just, it wouldn't be a plot it would just be a small conversation that happens, just because I like it when they bring up past things and reference different things from episodes. Amanda and James would still make the bet if like either of them wins with TNS East or TNS West. Amanda would say though, if she wins, James never mentions that they used to date again. It would just be a little funny thing. He'd tell Amanda that she has to give Riley his number, because James never really got over Riley, and Riley obviously broke up with him. So, and I do like Jiley overall, I just don't like how their relationship went on and stuff. So that would be like a little, oh, Jiley moment. So Amanda would win, and then Jiley fans would be crushed, and they'd be like, no, James won't get to give Riley his number. But Amanda would be like, hey, I'll give your number to Riley anyway, and I'll see what she says. Which would be cute. I wouldn't want Jiley to appear again in the series, but I'd like it then if there's at least a thought that Jiley could be happening behind the scenes. As they leave, I figured that Amanda would probably tell Jackie she's really pretty or something and say bye to Noah, which would give them closure, because it was really weird that they just broke up after being so lovey-dovey in season 4, and then they never mentioned their relationship again. So yeah, from there, everything would be the same pretty much. So in terms of Jiley, it could potentially be happening behind the scenes, but I wouldn't bring it to light. I wouldn't mention it again from there. I'd have obviously just a subtle hint from Amanda and James in season 5 about it. Riley would get an ending that develops her as a person, not just as somebody's girlfriend. And yeah, the next episode will lose in season 4. I hope you enjoyed this what if video. Leave a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts and feelings, and I will see you on Wednesday for a new video. Bye guys.